This episode is sponsored by DS, a team of makers, marketers, and entrepreneurs that help businesses transform their brand experience and unlock growth like never before. Are you a CMO, founder, or business leader looking to level up your brand and marketing? Head over to weareds.com and let's explore what is next for your business. That's weareds.com. Visit us to learn more.
Welcome to Forward Obsessed, where we talk to breakthrough business leaders and rising entrepreneurs about their journeys, origin stories, and aha moments.
Hey everyone, Pete Senna here, co-host of Forward Obsessed. Thank you so much for tuning in. First, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you could please just take a second and follow us on Apple Podcasts or subscribe to us on Spotify, wherever you tune in. Would really appreciate it. It would help get the word out. It helps us keep producing great content like this and having great entrepreneurs on the show. Speaking of great entrepreneurs, on this show, we had Jess Lynch. Jess was the founder and CEO of Wishroute. Really interesting company, driving accountability and behavior change. Jess saw some really interesting ups and downs. And I think what you're going to really love about this story is just where the seeds of entrepreneurship got planted for her in her family, how those challenges inspired her to take a different path and a different journey that wasn't just the typical big corporate finance institution that she was at with PwC, the large consulting company. So on this episode, you're going to hear lots of different tidbits that I think are going to really inspire you. We're going to talk about how growth truly happens at the edge of your comfort zone, what it looks like when you run out of money, what it looks like when you bounce back. And as always, in true Forward Obsessed moments, you're going to see those pivots, those pitfalls, and the rides, highs and lows of what it takes to build a startup. So thanks so much for tuning in to Forward Obsessed. Enjoy this episode with Jess Lynch. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Forward Obsessed. I'm your co-host, Pete Senna, joined always by
David Salinas.
And we've got Jess Lynch on the show today, who's becoming a fast friend. So Jess, thanks so much for making some time today.
Happy to be here. District is so inspiring. Spending time with you guys.
Thank you so much.
So let's get into it. So the seeds of entrepreneurship, where did they get planted for you? I know you've had some interesting runs with your family, your brother specifically, but maybe you could just unpack for us like the first moment where entrepreneurship was a thing that popped up in your brain.
Yeah, I think I was in third grade and I had my first business idea, and it was to breed hamsters.
Where were you?
I think in the car coming home from school.
No, what state?
Oh.
You're in Connecticut? Sorry.
I grew up in Marblehead, Massachusetts, just north of Boston, little seaside fishing town. And I went to a really creative elementary school called the Waldorf School. And I really credit my parents. Second grade, I was told by some teachers that I just wasn't that smart. And my mom needed to lower her expectations of what I was going to be capable of. And I think, gosh, she didn't take that lying down and said, nope, we need to switch schools because I see a lot of potential in my daughter. So she moved me to the Waldorf School. And yeah, driving home from school one day, I told my parents, I'm going to breed hamsters and sell the hamsters to kids at school.
Dumb question. Waldorf, like that's a way of teaching kids. Is that started there?
No, I think it was started in Germany.
Okay.
Just a location in Cape Ann, Beverly.
Cool.
And my parents thankfully knew a little better than me that you have to love the business you're working on. And they knew I wasn't really that much of a fan of animals. And I was insistent. I drew up, lots of colored pencils, crayons, a whole business plan about breeding hamsters for my kids in school. And so they also, always spurred my ideas. So they bought me one. You can't breed one hamster. And they were right that I couldn't touch the thing. I was terrified. It was a complete failure. But it did show me that you can have ideas, people can support them. And I always credit my parents for encouraging me, no matter what my interests were. I continued to be entrepreneurial. I couldn't get a job freshman year of college in my local town. I went to every retail store. No one would hire me. So instead, I hosted a summer camp in my backyard. And I made more money that 1 week of the summer than I would have made all summer working minimum wage at one of the local, town shops. So it's always been a seed in me. I think partly comes from my mom and my grandmother never took the status quo for granted. So my grandmother was one of the top writers for the Boston Globe. She had the most read lifestyle column.
That's awesome.
And she's written many books. And my mom really changed our whole lives. My brother was diagnosed with juvenile diabetes. So he was the first in our town. Wow. And the doctors were telling my mom he should eat ice cream after dinner to keep his blood sugars up overnight. And if you know anything about diabetes, sugar at night not great. And she just struck her, why should he eat worse now that he's been diagnosed with a chronic illness? And so she quit her job. She was a counselor at the time and started researching treatment options, went into all sorts of alternative care, and really found the power of lifestyle change. And to her credit, she helped us adopt those new habits slowly so they stuck. So we did walks after dinner as a family. We put spinach in our smoothie. We went from white bread to wheat to Ezekiel, slowly but surely. And there was a huge impact on my brother's health.
Just a big deal back then, too. I mean, nowadays, everyone's got some kind of a thing. But back then, not a lot of people were putting spinach in smoothies.
Right.
And your mom, and what an incredible advocate she was for both of you, because obviously when they said that you were not that smart or that you wouldn't be accomplished and that you wouldn't do that, she pulled you out of that school. She did her research. She found another school for you when your brother was diagnosed, and given these orders, she didn't believe it and she advocated. So what an incredible advocate she was for you.
It's also a really nice reminder about how broken healthcare and education is still to this day.
Yes.
Which we'll cover in another episode.
And she wrote a book about our family's experience to help other families learn from our journey. And we had the opportunity to give some talks as part of the book tour. And we got to help a lot of other families change their lifestyle in the same way. And it just showed me that when people are alone with change, it's really difficult. But when people do have the support they need, anything's possible. And so we were able to help families be that accountability buddy, in a sense, to help them adopt the lifestyle changes we had made. And it was really beautiful.
That's where your super connector came from. Community at a young age affected you in a positive way. That was one of the first things I noticed when I met Jess. Folks, if we're listening, have had the pleasure to know her, is she just connects dots like in a very interesting way. And I think the first time we met already, you were like sending emails, connecting different people. And I did the same, of course. But it's funny because I can see now where that passion comes from, because you saw the power of community and how it affected your family. So
can also see the thread to your next business, to your first business idea, but we won't go to that yet. I do want to spend some time on your education. So you went to the Waldorf school, and then let's fast forward to college. Where'd you go to college?
Babson, which has been a huge part of my story. I went there undergrad. I met my husband third day of freshman orientation. So he's also a big part of my story, enabled me to do a lot with his support.
He wasted his time, right? Day 3.
Didn't waste time. Nope. Asked him to ask me out 2 weeks later, and he did, thank gosh. And we got married 2 years after college, but we got to study abroad together, went to University of Edinburgh in Scotland. We both stayed for our master's in accounting to go to the CPA route. Actually started my career at PwC in financial forensics with a consulting group. But Babson have super entrepreneurial and super invigorating. It's been fantastic for me.
What's great about a lot of people are very big Babson fans, and they get a lot of credit for entrepreneurship and stuff like that. What is it about the school that makes it so great?
I think there's 3 things that immediately come to mind. First, it's entrepreneurial community. So they do a lot on campus to support new ventures being incubated and successful long term. And because there's then a lot of alum that has started businesses, there's just a great ecosystem around entrepreneurship. I think second, they hire professors that have done it, which seems like a simple thing, but a lot of professors haven't done the thing that they're teaching. And like for my, I went back to Babson for my MBA, which we may get into, but my adjunct professor was a VC on the West Coast and had been an entrepreneur many times. And he flew in every week to teach our class. And that's just an incredible learning that you don't get at every university.
Hell of a way to build your miles up, too.
Oh, yeah, right? Definitely. And then thirdly, they are very hands-on learning, experiential. So freshman year, right away, they have a Foundations of Management and Entrepreneurship class where they give the class seed money and you start a business. Freshman year, real money, real team, real product.
So hamster breeding again? Or?
Did something slightly different. It was a case to go over DVDs and video games so that you don't scratch the discs. Of course, now totally not useful.
I could use that back then, though, because I had some pretty scratched up DVDs. That's awesome. So during your time at Babson, I have to imagine, just because of the entrepreneurial ism that's in the water there, clearly, was it at that point that you decided that you thought that you were destined for entrepreneurship, or you were like, I'm going to go the CPA route, I'm going to do the PwC thing with my husband, that type of thing, or?
Yeah, it's interesting. I always remark that when you're in your senior year of college, it's really the college and career center that kind of frames your opportunities. And at the time, I was very into finance and numbers. And so the two options that I had kind of been framed as potential choices was iBanking or Big Four accounting. And now I know there was actually 100 options in between that, but that was the view I had at the time. And I didn't want to sleep on a couch and work 200 hours a week. So I was like, okay, Big Four accounting it is. And then I connected with the right partner at the right time at actually a competing firm to the one I ended up joining, who did forensics. And I was like, wow, fraud investigation, government contracting disputes, litigation, I get to travel. That sounds cool. And so I actually leveraged that opportunity at a different firm to get the opportunity at PwC, because they only hire like one associate a year.
Wow.
And it was a phenomenal career. So I jumped in 2 feet first. It really mixed my interest in law and finance and variability. Every project was a crisis. We had to go in. I was immediately, even as associate, given a lot of responsibility. I led large teams and just learned so much.
I have a question for you. So you've done a lot of leadership work in your career, and I got to poke on that. How do you set someone up? Like if you were coaching someone right now on your team, a younger person, how do you set them up and get them ready for crisis? Because I think nowadays everything's changing so fast, technology, the world, society. And I see that a lot with folks who are just getting out of school, whether they're starting at a startup or a company or whatever it is. That variability, that ambiguity, I see, especially nowadays, kind of spikes all those kind of mental health challenges, toxic and a lot of the other kind of things that pop up that young people have been saying a lot lately on social. But how would you coach somebody through learning how to adapt to that environment in their first role?
Yeah, I think it comes down to a conversation about fear. I always say life begins at the end of your comfort zone. And a superpower of mine and what I help other people adopt as well is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And it just is so key. And so it's just having acceptance when you do feel uncomfortable, you do feel pushed, and just know that it's okay. And you're not alone to feel overwhelmed or stressed. And like, that's just part of growth. And so I think making people feel more comfortable in this whole realm of emotions they're feeling and having open conversation about it. How do you guys handle that?
Yeah, well, on my side, I try to just model it as like, I always say like, you can't have innovation without failure. And you can't have failure without fear, right? So in some cases, like if like you're going to suck at something no matter what it is, if it's a new thing. So you have to just start from zero and understand that like even the best like Google stuff. One of the things I do a lot of times with my team when I'm on screen shares is when I don't know something with like a junior team, I'll actually Google it right in front of them on the thing. And like, look, like even someone who's been doing this for 20 years, like I'm Googling stuff every single day. Because I had a team member one time a couple of years ago say to me like, we just feel like you guys just know everything. And I'm like, no, we don't. Like the number one job of a good programmer is like Googling, or now ChatGPT, right? But it's like, so I think that just being able to try to model it wherever I can, say like, look, we don't know it all. It's all about just being able to like learn and iterate and test, that sort of thing. That's how I've done it.
Right? Be vulnerable that you don't know.
I was always taught, accidentally, my father had this way about him where he would teach me to minimize fear. So whenever you were scared, he would refer to it as bullshit. So if you brought any problems to him or any issues, he would say, that's in his cute little Spanish accent, he would say, David, that's bullshit. So I learned to minimize it as I got older and wiser, and I had a larger vocabulary than he did. I just created a framework around a scale around like what the problems could be, what the problems are, like where do they sit on the spectrum of like death,
right?
And so on. So I would always say, like, if someone is dying in your family, it's like it's like a 5 to a 10 issue, and as long as they're not dying, it's like under a 5. And I would just sort of put it into a bucket so that I could, to give it perspective, because I think that what everybody does, especially, and I noticed this in our first company, every time something went wrong, people treated it like a fire. They used the word fire, and I'm like, I'm banning the word fire. No more fires. I don't care what's happening. If someone's going to fire us, it doesn't matter. A client, anything that happened, I never want to use the word fire, because a fire, it automatically gets you excited, automatically spikes your cortisol levels. It stresses you out, and you're starting on your back foot. Versus what my father would say, which is, that's bullshit. And then I always used to get mad at him, like, stop minimizing my problems. And then I realized that he was just settling you down so that you could actually prepare for those issues. So I was lucky. It sort of was burnt into me sort of through DNA. It was innately, through this upbringing. But ultimately, that, that's how I've always dealt with it. And I've tried to pass that along. I give everybody the perspective of a scale. And I'm like, if it's not here, don't worry about it. And the only time you come to me where you're like, the world's on fire, is if your family's sick, if you're sick, if someone is in trouble, then you tell me I've got a 5 to 10 alarm fire type of situation. Otherwise, everything is, you can deal with anything, including, running out of money and all this kind of stuff in the business.
Speaking of crisis, so tell the audience a little bit about some of those crises that you faced. I know some of those involved FBI investigations. I feel like it was like some of the TV shows I watched. So maybe you could talk a little bit about just some of your experience there before you had that hard moment where you had to make the pivot into entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and there was a big tipping point for me around fear. And I'd be curious if you each had a tipping point where then from that moment of looking fear in the face and saying, fuck it, like everything got easier. So I faced that when I made the leap to go back to school for my MBA, because I was going to go invest in myself, but I wasn't necessarily going to be more valuable. But I knew I wanted to start a company, and there was something in me. And ever since I kind of got off the corporate ladder and doing all those check boxes, and then everything worked out for me, like ever since then, it's been so much easier handling fear and being aware of it. But at PwC, I worked, in financial forensics. I worked on a variety of cases. Oftentimes it was for a corporation that could afford our fees. And I believe everyone deserves a defense. But sometimes that was at the expense of my nights and weekends. And as I began to learn less, it started to not feel as in alignment with how I wanted to spend my time. But I got to work on investigations of fraud within corporations, government contracting disputes. So if a contractor overbilled the government and was being sued, they had to have someone come in like us and figure out who had made the call, how much one party owed the other, how to prevent it in the future, what just systematic things in the corporation allowed a decision or a lack of decision, which was usually the bigger problem, to happen. And so I got to learn how to, first of all, investigate forensically from email to financials. I got to present to large Fortune 500 boards, got to figure out how to talk to a whole bunch of different stakeholders, from those that were in the weeds of being part of that overbilling, to the company that had hired us, to the company on the other side that was suing. So it was really a good in-depth of like how business works generally. The only public project I was on that I can actually talk to was the BP oil spill. And that was really fascinating. I spent 18 months in New Orleans and worked on behalf of claimants as part of the BP settlement to figure out which businesses were owed what in kind of remediation. And it was so just deeply sad because these companies have been wiped out because of the oil spill. And it was 4 or 5 years later that they're getting money back and the businesses were already gone. So it was really heartbreaking. And I also learned how to talk to anyone about anything, because we'd be on the phone with people who had lost everything. And we had to figure out how to still get the information from them that we needed to ultimately help them, but deal with their frustration and deep sadness around the situation.
Wow. Yeah. Every time you talk to them, because they haven't been paid, there's never been no remediation. There's been, you just keep opening the wound up. So you have to deal with that. Yeah.
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 That's tough. And guys, sorry.
I was just going to say, what did you learn from that? What was the most important thing dealing with people that are frustrated and sad, and how to open them up and have those hard conversations? What lessons did you learn?
Well, the importance of putting yourself in someone else's shoes, which I now try to do in every interaction. And I think it helps me help other people better, because we're not all great at asking for help. But because I can put myself in other people's shoes, I don't get it right 100% of the time, but I really try to do that. I can think ahead about what they need that they might not have asked me, and make those connections that you were referring to. So for these claimants, I knew I ultimately had their best interest in heart and in mind, and I was trying to get them the best outcome, but had to listen first and let them get their frustration out before I could turn to how to help.
Yeah.
I've known a lot of folks who have been in some type of financial accounting, forensics, et cetera. And what all of them seem to have in common that you don't is many of them seem very cold or stoic in terms of how they show up. And I feel like a lot of those organizations, at the big 4, big 5, whatever, tend to be a little cold as well. You're a very warm person. So would you say that you felt that in that organization, that like I don't fit in here because of that? And did you sort of feel that coldness that I'm referring to? Or maybe is that just my own projection that I'm putting on here?
I only worked at one company in forensics at PwC, and we had a really special group. So I think I benefit from some of the people I learned from, that it was okay to bring your whole person to work. PwC also did an extraordinary job around diversity and inclusion. They had big initiatives around there led by Tim Ryan, who actually was a Babson grad. And I felt that firsthand about it was okay to bring your whole self to work and work hard. And
what does that mean, to bring your whole self to work, just for the audience?
Yeah, be vulnerable, share when you don't know, ask people about the hard things going on in their life, and be just authentically you. Also be professional, but not be closed down and like, oh yeah, we're accountants and we have to do boring spreadsheets.
Very cool. And so what was that turn like where you said to yourself, I'm sure you can probably remember the day you were probably working on some project and you said, you know what, this is it. It's time to hang it up. Tell me.
I was in Korea on a project for a government contractor there, wanting to contract with U.S. government contractors. And there's a lot of laws and regulations around it. And so they brought us in to help them get ready to take on a new contract. And being in a remote part of South Korea, no access to vegetables, no freedom to go where I wanted after work or on the weekend. Like, it was a month without my husband. It was like a big sacrifice. And I realized I was starting to learn less. The projects coming up, I sort of knew what was around the corner, and I love to learn. I love variety. And I also realized just that values alignment. If we were selling to companies that could afford our fees, which were usually the ones that had done the harming, I didn't want to spend my nice weekend's life in that. And another dynamic too was there weren't women partners that I saw myself in. They didn't have the life I was looking for. And work-life balance is kind of a weird term, but again, I just didn't see the day-to-day in any of the partners that looked like me, showing me that this was going to be a long-term fit. So I started looking at other jobs, and it was really challenging because I had such a diverse skill set and I didn't see a specialization that fit. So I had been looking online for a while and finally found this role, chief of staff, because you get to roll up your sleeves and like work right hand in hand with the CEO and be involved in a bunch of different things. And I mentioned it to my mom. She's like, Jess, that's just a watered down CEO position. Like, you should just be the CEO. And no offense to chief of staff, I would take that role on in the future. Like, it's a really cool role. But it struck me, I was like, maybe there's something to that for me personally. And then I got the opportunity to go back to Babson for my MBA, and I could roll over my credits from my master's in accounting. So it was going to be like half the credits, half the price, still a lot of money. And it would be a chance to pause and see what could come of it. And I didn't know where I'd be next, which is what made it so scary, because I was going to go invest money in myself, but didn't know what the outcome would be. I had hoped it would lead to me starting my own venture, but I was burnt out traveling every week in Korea, had no idea what that would actually look like. And so it was a very hard decision. And I mean, I worked with the most amazing group at PwC. They made it very hard to leave. They offered me to pay for the MBA. They wanted to keep me. And so it was a very, very hard decision.
Then you go back to Babson, and now you're getting your MBA. What was that like? Because now you're in the heart of like what their specialty is.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I was very split on whether to do it or not. But I went and talked to one of my professors that I had prior, Ed Merrim. He's a very successful entrepreneur. And he just said the right thing to me at the right time, which is he's always regretted the opportunities. He always said he tries to take the opportunities he might regret not taking, because he doesn't want to live a life of regret, even if it's scary. And so he said that, and it just was a big click. I'm like, all right, let me go for it, because I knew they were really entrepreneurial. I did want to do something in that space. It was going to happen, hopefully. And it was ironically in my entrepreneurship class that I came up with the idea for Wishroute. We had to do rocket pitches, 3 slides, 3 minutes. Each person in the class had to come up with a rocket pitch, and I was agonizing. But I had been investing in my meditation practice since I went back to school. So I really leaned into that. And so I think it was a mix of being in touch with my intuition and being problem obsessed. I was just listening to everyone around me. And I heard people say, I wish I was meditating. I wish I was exercising more. I wish I was eating healthier. And it struck me that we have hundreds of thousands of mobile apps and products and subscriptions for that. Like, what's missing? And I reflected on my family's experience with the lifestyle change and realized that it was that lack of support. And so I did customer discovery interviews to untangle that, and realized when people were successful, they mentioned having a friend check in, an accountability buddy, a text. And so that was the aha of like, okay, what if we add coaching, accountability buddies to the products we're already trying to use and adopt? You know, what would be possible for those companies and the individuals?
It's not the habit, it's the cue, right?
Yes.
And
right.
James Clear has them.
Exactly. The trigger.
Yeah. Very cool. So just tell us a little bit more about that business, just for the audience who might not know. And we'll, of course, put everything in the show notes, as always, folks.
Yeah. So it started as a non-technical founder, just had a few other kind of colleagues that were interested in starting this company with me. And we started texting people from our own phones in the morning saying, hey, remember, this is something you want to work on. Here's an article. Here's a podcast. Here's a YouTube video. And then we check in at the end of the day asking, did you do it? And we really tried to inject variability, which is important for behavior change. So every morning it was a different flavor, something unique, different emojis, an image, a video, a podcast, all these different kind of multimedia formats. And then when we would check in and ask if they did it or not, it was really about helping them save face and stay encouraged. Because if you're not planning for people not to be successful, you're not going to be successful, because behavior change is hard and habit change is hard. So we really took a lot of kind of the cutting edge behavior change research with my personal experience and created a judgment-free coaching methodology that we then trained our Wishroute guides in to coach our users. And so it started from our own phones. Then I recruited my co-founder and CTO, Chris Guglietti, who started turning this into more of a scalable platform. And we went through a lot of ups and downs and pivots. The first came at the pandemic. Because we had started working with individuals, we looked for ways to scale faster. So we partnered with nutritionists and personal trainers. We looked for ways to scale faster. We partnered with gyms. The pandemic shut down. All gyms have
Demolished everybody.
It was a low moment because we had the perfect solution for them. I still believe to this day we were exactly what they needed to engage their members and add value while they were shut down in person. But if you remember, people were like, this is going to be 6 weeks. This is going to be another month. And so they weren't ready to make a fundamental shift in how they view their business.
So I want to come back to that moment, but before you do, I want to explore something that I think is really important that we haven't explored on the show before, which is the need and the necessity for a technical co-founder. Mm. So I hear from entrepreneurs all the time that are looking for technical co-founders. We've had plenty of people that have come to us in some capacity asking for help to join the team or to find somebody for them or so on and so forth.
Trying to poach me.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't want to cross him, trust me. He's like, you're going to do what?
Stealing from me.
In your opinion, how necessary is it to have a technical co-founder? And more importantly, now in your new position where you're working on the venture side, how often do you push people to do and to find a technical co-founder?
I think it's really important for someone to have a trusted advisor at the very least, intimately involved in the business and able to help educate and formulate the vision and execution plan around how you scale. So if you're trying to build a venture scalable startup, not everyone is, but if you are trying to, if you aren't technical and don't have that perspective, like especially as a first-time founder, ingrained in you, it's very hard to operate how you need to be venture scalable. So I don't think you need a technical co-founder. I think you need a strong team member, an advisor, someone, because otherwise you're missing half the world, or a certain percent of the world. Personally, I was immediately kind of told I needed one, that there were no choices. And we went through Babson Summer Venture Program, which was an awesome launching point from being in school to actually pursuing this venture. And I started pitching angel investors and getting some feedback from investors. And I realized I was at a disadvantage as a woman. I was also younger. I think I was 25, 26. And I wasn't technical. And I kept being told, you need a technical co-founder to raise money. And at the time, I didn't have any other experiences like I now have to push back on that. So I did. I sought a technical co-founder and ended up with Chris. Very lucky to have worked with him. And he was male and he was white and he was older. And I can't say that hurt our ability to fundraise. I think it helped an extraordinary amount. I now try to look and coach founders for who they are, where they're trying to go. And I don't think it's an all or nothing thing to have a technical co-founder, because I think now I could successfully start a scalable venture without one. I think you can have people you hire, you can have advisors out of equity, you can outsource development, but I now have built a technical product. So I also have so much more knowledge and understanding of what it takes and what to look for. But I do resent a little bit how much of a box people put my own view of the world in on that.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you sharing, and also no code and ChatGPT.
Right, there's so much more accessibility.
Pete told me he wrote 6 weeks of code in 60 hours.
Yeah.
Recently because of ChatGPT, so things are definitely changing.
It's changing, which is great.
Yeah, and it's a shame that the world is like that, and unfortunate. So now I'll bring us back to where we were. Pandemic hit.
Yeah, I want to talk about the darkness of, because this is the thing that I think a lot of founders that listen to the show that are in it, whether they're first time, second time, everybody talks about the highs of entrepreneurship. What we like to do on this show is we like to talk about the roller coaster, the ups and the downs, right? So you're a positive person, optimistic, meditator, the whole thing. What got you through some of those low point moments, right? So now you got all this movement, this traction. Pandemic shuts the world down, right? Unprecedented global event that we've probably all heard and talked about way too damn much, right? Talk to us about your mental health during that time. Talk to us about what it's like as a first-time founder and CEO in the business, and how did it feel? Because I want the audience to feel that, and sorry to make you relive it. But more importantly, I want you to talk about the things that you did that kept you together, because you can't just stop the race when you're the founder and the CEO, right? You got to keep going. And that's what I think this audience needs to hear a lot more about, because I'm finding now that people aren't leaning in as much, because the more that they learn about how hard it is, the more they lean back. So I want more to lean in. So if you could lean in for us, that'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. So it wasn't one moment where we realized things weren't going to work. Like, because it was an ever-evolving situation, we kept trying new pitches to gyms or fitness studios or other online communities to host challenges to help people, lose weight over 2 months, or just stay accountable to a program that a company was offering. So it was a series of months where everything we were trying wasn't gaining traction. We did an amazing thing during the pandemic that did have traction but wasn't making money. So we were losing money day to day, but we were supporting nurses that were on the front lines of COVID. And we were doing a self-care program for nurses, basically. And it was a 1 month daily check-ins, daily tips on how to meditate and find peace in the storm. And we were getting texts back from nurses that one of their friends had just committed suicide, or they lost 6 patients that day. I mean, darkest stuff. Mm-hmm. But it actually was the most resilience building thing for me, because every day that I felt scared watching our bank account dwindle and scared of being able to pay my team members, I could go into our text message platform and see the conversations and see that, oh my God, we are literally saving lives. Like, not that we were set up insurance-wise for that, but we were being that caring, unconditionally loving support system to a lot of people. So being able to see the impact of the product was absolutely what was able to keep me going.
Purpose rings bells, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I kept meditating, and I can't stress that enough, like being able to hear my gut. But I will say, when the bank account hit 0, my husband and I started paying payroll from our own savings. And I hadn't told our investors that we had run out of money. I didn't know how to communicate that, how to have the conversation. I feel like I had failed. I hadn't done it before. I hadn't been through it. And I just kept seeing our bank account go down for our savings personally. But there was something inside me that just said, you have to keep going. There's something on the other side of this. And I literally was Googling, like, when to give up. Like, how do you know as a founder you should quit? Because, we only had a few more weeks of payroll in our bank account personally. And it was just really scary. And my husband just kept saying, I trust you. We have 20K left. Like, I trust you. If this is how you think we should spend it, do it, which is just amazing. But I went back to that professor that actually gave me the
regrets advice.
The regrets advice, exactly. And I said, what do I do? And he's like, are you still having fun? I'm like, yeah. Like, I still am in this wholeheartedly. He's like, well, then you have to go back to your investors and tell them what's going on and see if any of them will, put more money in, which I didn't know was a thing. And so I did. I called up my closest investors and I was blown away. They're like, do you still have conviction? I'm like, yeah, I see this opportunity to white label what we're doing and work with the mobile apps that kind of originally had been the spark of inspiration. And they're like, okay, yeah, like I'm in for another 5K, I'm in for another 10K. And basically we passed the hat around and I raised a few $100,000 in that time and was able to stop draining my personal bank account. I pivoted, and this is a process I now teach other founders, but we brainstormed what are all the ICPs or ideal customer personas that we could sell to. So connected fitness companies like Peloton, meditation apps, vitamin subscriptions, healthcare companies. And I put that in front of our investors and advisors with the top brands in each. And then I got connected to 70, 80% of the companies on my target list within 6 weeks. And 6 weeks later, we had our first paid pilot in that direction. And it totally took off. We raised another $500,000 or $600,000. We went through Techstars. We got to work with really cool health and wellness brands that were like dream partners and customers. Some just took our proposals and built it internally, which is a signal that I've since learned from. But it was really amazing to change so many end users' lives through these large-scale brands. But it
piss you off.
Yeah.
So I want to back us up.
I hate when people steal ideas and do some of them.
I want to back us up to the moment when you were Googling, when should I quit?
Yeah.
Because in almost every conversation that we've had on Forward Obsessed, there comes a moment where shit hits the fan, things are going badly, pitfalls come, and you have to make a decision. And most of the stories go with, I just continued on the path, I broke through it, I had an aha moment, I did a pivot, and it worked out. But if you talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, as do we, and sometimes you have to look at some entrepreneurs and you think to yourself, like, you should quit. It's not looking good for you.
Yeah.
What is the difference between being tenacious, finding the pivot, or breaking through the wall versus hanging it up? What did you learn on your Google quest of should I quit?
Well, I faced it in the next hard moment at Wishroute, and that led to us selling the company.
Mm-hmm.
So it was 2 years later. Mm-hmm. It was the spring of 2022, and the market shifted, and we were preparing for our seed round. We were kind of just where we needed to be, a little under, but I've learned I'm pretty good at storytelling and pitching now. So I was like, I think I could pull this off, because investors could kind of relate to what we were doing. Everyone's tried to build a habit. They've downloaded a product. They've abandoned it. So it's like, it's tangible enough. I think I can do this. And we had just signed a dream customer, like literally had probably been on my vision board when I started the company. It was a large scale pilot, bigger than we'd ever done, and much higher contract value on the other side than we had ever had the opportunity for. And we did the pilot, and it started off good, and the numbers came back that it wasn't working. And so we dropped everything, like reconfigured it, brought in outside experts, like this, we have to make this work because it's really it's key to our raise. And in the meantime, the markets are shifting, and where you need to be to raise a seed round jumped. So like we were barely where we needed to be. Now we really weren't where we needed to be. And the pilot results came back at the end, not in our favor. And I had learned a lot through that about the need for deep product analytics for our product to be successful on top of our customers' products. And this company we had been working with, it's a public company, I'm like, they have this product analytics set because they need it, and they didn't. And so it showed me that if we were going to be successful, we need to really start over from a product analytics suite perspective and potentially build out that whole product for them, the nudging to be on top of. Like they needed to understand during a free trial, what does behavior look like from a converted user versus a not converted user? And they just didn't have it. And I also had made assumptions that I thought we had validated, but we hadn't to the extent we needed to, that a meditation app is similar to a meditation app, is similar to a meditation app, or is similar to a fitness app. And there were more differences than we planned, which made my view of how we scale across brands change. So I was realizing we need more money than I thought we needed because we had to build out this whole product analytics suite to just be able to keep doing what we were doing. Some of our scaling assumptions across brand weren't turning out to be true. And we weren't where we needed to be to raise a seed round. We had 2 investors pull out of our bridge. They had both gotten laid off. Like it was just a terrible moment. And all of a sudden we had weeks of runway.
Wow.
When I thought we had at least 6 months. And in that moment, similar to during the pandemic, I had to look inward and go, we'd had some more savings. Do I start pulling from our savings again? Like, what do I do? And I just didn't have that call to keep going. I had a call of like, this is a different moment. And it's just this inner knowing of like keep going. And I didn't have it. You have something that's working for certain companies. How can you go internal to a company and make it really successful? Because we had something really special that does change behavior that end users love and are addicted to and engage with long-term really frequently, but we just couldn't scale it across brands. So I was like, okay, the next thing to do is go internal and one brand. And so that's what led me to kick off our M&A process, which I did bring the company through. But it was a very low moment. If I was going to say I've ever felt broken in my life, it was in that moment of deciding, what do I do next? A lot of meditating, a lot of crying.
Yeah.
I mean, morning, noon, night, I was a mess. Not that I didn't have good judgment through it, but it was incredibly emotional because I was on a fast track having to process what that meant for me, my team, my identity, our investors. 95% of our investors were extraordinarily supportive, like unbelievable, human first, founder first, trying to help me figure out what to do. And then we had, a few investors, unfortunately, and they have every right to be upset and want a different path for me and the company. But when you're in such a vulnerable position to have people doubt you and say they won't support you, that you're making a huge mistake, that you're not fit, it just was really challenging. And it really hurt.
And
it really hurt.
And it's an accelerated mourning process, right? Because
it was a week.
Yeah, it's like I have to. It's like, or days, right? So it's like shit's hitting the fan. I have days to do it. Then you go into the M&A process, and the company, and we're not going to name names, but they're a big company. They put you through the paces for 6 months, and then they turn out to just be stealing from you. So I have a question about that because that happens a lot to a lot of people. In hindsight, were there any key indicators in that process that you look back on and say, I should have known right then and there that they were just, trying to steal from me and use me?
Warning signs for future founders.
Yeah, one warning sign was, and I don't think anything was like malicious or that was the intent the whole time.
Okay.
I think there are systems in place for M&A teams and just for larger companies that give them this opportunity to go deep with a startup, benefit from all the founders' learnings, and then decide if they want to acquire or not based on the set of circumstances at that time. So I don't think they set out to be malicious by any means, but I do think it wasn't fair by the end. And they skipped the letter of intent. So we were trying to close by the end of the year. So this would have been, we kicked off in like September, October, I think, with them. And then we were trying to close by end of year for their own budgeting purposes. And so just for back and forth with lawyer reps, they're like, let's just do that, the term sheet, LOI in with the purchase agreement. Let's just like get the deal done in the next few weeks. So they said that to me. I was like, that great. Like, yeah, let's just get the deal done. But then it extended into the next year. And then we had no protections. So I had another deal on the table at the time. And if I had had some sort of term sheet, letter of intent that maybe compensated us if they did let the deal fall through, I wouldn't have lost the other deal. Now, we still ended up better than if I had taken that other deal. I don't have a regret around it, but getting a letter of intent, getting a term sheet as soon as that's appropriate does add some protections through the rest of the process. And we did get that.
What would that fee be called, just for the people that are listening?
Early termination fee. I was very in the terms in that moment. I don't remember them all now. But there's certain provisions where if the deal doesn't get done, they still owe you some money. Cover time, legal fees. Exactly. So I would have put that in place.
If you need a good startup lawyer, just let us know. We've got a bunch of them.
Yeah. So that was a key moment. And then it's just hard because they're asking me questions about how we would roll it out so they can work on their own financial model of the upside once Wishroute's capabilities are rolled out across their products, how much lift in revenue. Like, it was all very logical of why they needed what they needed. And I didn't share any of like the secret sauce, but it was enough where they felt like they could do it on their own. So when they told me no, I caught up with them, a few weeks later, and they're like, "Oh, you'll be happy to know, like, yeah, the product team's, still going to build this out." It's like,
you'll be happy.
I'd be happy to know.
The audacity to say that.
I know.
Like, what do they
really
think?
Shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was. I was speechless. I actually didn't know what to say at the time. I didn't say anything. I was just like, "What?"
Yeah, it's amazing how
What chose violence? No one chose violence.
But it was an incredible experience. I pitched 60 companies on our deal and had a few that we were negotiating with at the end. And yeah, this one, it seemed like it was going to be a great fit. They were going to hire some of our employees. They even had employment agreements drafted with some of my employees that were foregoing their own job search because they were counting on this. So when it fell through, I mean, it was devastating. And that was probably the second worst moment in my entrepreneurial journey, because it just was like, wow, is everything going to go in a box? Like, all that positive kind of energy and effort into this venture, is that just done?
How's that company doing today? Better? Worse?
Worse.
I
mean, I don't say that I'm not happy to hear that. But I really think that we were the differentiating kind of secret sauce they needed.
There's an old saying that karma's a bitch, and I don't think she is. I think she's a really lovely lady that gives you exactly what you deserve. So good for you. And then you would go on to get acquired, which is what this show is all about.
Yeah, we did.
Tell us about that. How long did it take? How long after this?
A few weeks.
Down? Oh, really? Right after that?
It gives me a lot of faith. It's one of those moments where, like, whenever I worry about something working out, you just have to remember all we know is that we don't know. Our brains think they can predict the future. So most of my investors, my mentors were telling me, "Jess, you've done enough. You've done more than enough. You've given this 6 months. You did your very best. This might just need to shut down. That's okay." And I just had that inner knowing, though, that there was something, and I didn't want to kick off another 6-month process. Like, how much of my life and my efforts am I going to give this? And so I just said to myself, let me just give it a few weeks. Just do nothing, actually. Like, really sit back and just see if anything happens. Because I'd given the M&A process so much effort and so much of myself. I'm like, something might ripple from that. And it did. On the same exact day, 2 of our customers reached out and one of my investors reached out and said, "I want the IP." All on the same day. And it's like, well, that's a sign. And so I started talking with each of them a little deeper. And within weeks, a deal came together. So we sold our IP to a company called Suggestic. They're amazing. It's a telewellness platform founded by 2 co-founders on the West Coast. And they are training an LLM in our hundreds of thousands of text message conversations that we had to change behavior and build healthy habits, as well as our coaching methodology. And then we licensed the IP back to a company named Guidely, who I got to work with for 6 months. I actually did a bit of a pivot turnaround engagement with them after the acquisition. And one of our investors' company, Runzy, which is an amazing app to help you find and train for races like 5Ks, marathons. And I just was really lucky how it all came together, because the product and our learnings live on, and I was able to return some capital to our investors.
Were you lucky, though, or I forget what the definition of luck is, but at this moment, but like, you just strike me as this person, when I met you, and I think I met you, and then you were going to talk to Pete like an hour later. Yeah. Like, you just turn over so many rocks and touch so many people, but meaningfully, right? Like, your touches aren't superficial. Mm-hmm. You have a certain energy to you. You come off, you're always smiling. Even listening to you speak, you don't come off as like an entrepreneur. You come off as just, I can't even describe it. There's like some kind of, you have a vibe to you. So I'm curious, do you really think it was luck? And do you think what you did and how you did it is teachable?
That's a lot of big questions. Unpack those. Some big questions. I can't wait to hear. Yeah.
I do think it's teachable, and I now do that. Right after the deal went through, I sat on my deck for 12 hours, morning to night, and I wrote down everything I learned and the whole process I went through. How we documented our assets internally as a team, how we did our target list, how we updated our deck for each new company, the forwardable emails we used to get the introductions we needed to the decision makers of the companies we pitched. I totally think it's teachable. I think any founder can do this if they have the opportunity to give it the time and effort. You know, one thing I don't think enough founders talk about is like, I had the privilege to pursue M&A. My rent and groceries were covered by my partner. If a founder was relying on their venture for their income and you run out of money, you can't, or you can, but I mean, I gave my full-time effort. Yeah. I gave it probably 8 to 7 p.m., 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. every day for 6 to 8 months to make this happen. That's something I had the privilege to pursue, but still, I gave it my full effort. I think it's teachable. I think if you have the opportunity, you can pull this off, you can do it. I also think timing matters. Like, the fact that these 3 companies were in the position, time, interest in this, in that moment, there's a bit of luck. So I thank you for acknowledging, like, it was a lot of consistent effort and persistence and genuine caring in every conversation I had that put me in the position to receive this synchronistic event happening. There it is. But that big company that, ended up kind of screwing us or backing out at the last second, that can happen to anyone, and that's not a reflection of the time and effort I put in. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a bit of luck and a lot of effort.
Care.
Care is the thing. You answered that beautifully, by the way. The string of words that you put together, which I don't have at the top, but I'm going to listen to it multiple times to memorize it, was beautifully said. So thank you for answering that.
You got to ask the wire question. Don't skip your question.
Yeah. Well, when you sign the documents, we always
celebrated. Oh my God.
We always ask when the wire hits. When you sign the documents, when the wire hits, how did you feel?
A huge weight off my shoulders. Just that it had all been worth it.
I would imagine this was a crying moment for you.
I think
different kind of crying.
A lot of tears. I think crying is such a powerful emotion that moves you forward. Mm-hmm. You release things, you revitalize. Yeah, I'm a big fan of crying, but I definitely cried. I also texted my best founder friend. I'm actually now an investor in her company, but I remember she was the first one I texted because she had been with me every step of the way through the process, encouraging me. She had such faith that it was going to happen. And so she was the first one I texted.
And you were still young at this point, right? How old are you when you exited?
It was just last year, so I was 32. Now I'm 33.
Incredible. What an incredible story.
Thank you.
And then you would go, once you exited, did you take any time off or did you go right to work?
I went right to work. I joined.
Not even a vacation?
Okay, I did a retreat. I promised myself. I promised myself if I pulled it off, I would go on a retreat. And I did. I went to this incredible place called The Sanctuary in Phoenix, Arizona.
I think I've heard of it.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of it.
Oh, yeah.
You said it to me, I think.
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't been, but I did.
A big celebrity had stayed in the spot I was in the week before. And when the bellman told me that, I was like, wow, I guess I'm really in the right place for this. But yeah, I did a bunch of spa treatments, unplugged my phone completely. I gave everyone the front desk, number. If anyone needed me, they'd find me, and I just unplugged for a few days. It was amazing. But yeah, that wire moment was just, it was so special. It was like everything had paid off. That following my intuition every step of the way, it was very validating.
Mm-hmm. Cathartic, right? For sure.
Yeah, cathartic, exactly. And there was a lot of resilience for me that came along the way. All those hard moments. You asked, is the M&A process like teachable? And I just found so much resilience. And it's like, if I can get through this, I can help other founders get through this, and it's going to be worth it. So
what's the book coming out?
You know what? I wrote that down because I'm gonna need that Notion database. Like, you're in a long line, a lineage of women that have books. So like, technically, you're up.
I do imagine one's not in me, but maybe not quite yet. More of a story to develop.
Well, this manuscript is building.
It's building in Notion.
I love it. So then you came back, and now you're going to work for Suggestic.
Yes.
And Guidely.
Exactly. So Guidely was actually the primary role. They are such an amazing mission-driven company. They were matching life coaches and holistic practitioners with individuals, like 3 of us, and really pulling out the gifts of that practitioner and helping them match with the right person that they could help. But unfortunately, customer acquisition costs, especially around this time, which was part of why the timing for Wishroute became challenging. Our customers were struggling. Customer acquisition costs in health and wellness just went through the roof as platforms like Meta just became so much more expensive. So e-commerce and the pandemic, a lot more dollars going into this, hard to get the eyes. And so
it's also the rise of the coach. Right. So you're not just dealing with businesses and apps. You're dealing with every single person with an Instagram and a TikTok that wants to be a coach that's acquiring customers for their master classes and so on and so forth.
Right.
So it makes total sense that the cost per acquisition would just explode.
Totally explode. And so they still had funds in the bank, though.
Yeah.
And they asked me, led by an amazing man, Amir, to come in and help them do new customer discovery, figure out who's the right target market and how can they serve that target market. Basically, new product discovery goes 0 to 1 again. And so I joined them as their head of product, mostly as a defense mechanism for myself because I wasn't ready to be a founder again. But I really was playing kind of that leader role.
Why not? Was it the battle scars?
Just so burnt out. The responsibility for something being successful. This was literally like the next day. Like, not one day after.
So the retreat's over, you get back.
I actually started working with Guidely before I went on the retreat.
Oh, okay.
So before the acquisition was final, I already was in this role. So, like, not even a day off in between.
Got it.
So I feel like now I've rejuvenated, but I'm like, I don't want to be in charge of the team. I don't want to be in charge of wear that CEO role again. But I essentially was. So I went in and did new customer discovery and learned that life coaches are an underserved market for how they show up online. So you did the perfect segue. They're trying to acquire customers online. They're trying to figure out how to stay active on social media. It's also not their gift. They love the work with clients. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to spend time on a computer. And so we determined there's an opportunity to be an AI-powered marketing assistant to basically automate the online presence for life coaches and holistic practitioners. And so we validated that, did a beta surveying, customer discovery interviews, drove a wait list of over 1,000. And we realized, wow, this really has legs. So we were able to bring in some more capital. And then I, though, also had to look internal and go, I don't want to wear this founder hat. I just wasn't ready. And so I had, a lot of open, transparent conversations with Amir, and we realized it's better to bring someone else in to lead this next chapter, that we had found a new opportunity. It's so exciting. It's something to pursue that seems really promising. And we actually found the most amazing product leader that had done this for personal trainers at TRX. And so now he leads the team. And they are about to launch the platform. It might be this week that they're launching it. I just got to see a test version last week, and it's phenomenal. I'm so excited for them. So I did that for the 6 months after the acquisition. And I also advised Suggestic, I still do to this day. I'm still involved in how they are integrating RIP and scaling and, generally supporting any way I can.
Were all of your investors happy?
95%. All but 2.
2?
And I actually had 50 investors.
Wow.
30 lines on the cap table, but had an angel group that was TBD Angels, which now I'm a member of,
Nice.
which is really amazing to be on the other side. But had 20 investors through TBD Angels. And I got to say, people advised you don't want a messy cap table, you don't want too many investors. It was an amazing network to have invested in me. When we looked for our head of operations, Karen Stonis, who we ended up hiring, I just put it out to that group. And within 2 weeks, we had the most incredible candidates come through. I met her like a week after we were looking, and she was on the team 3 weeks later. Same with our head of engineering, Howie Rosenblatt. Put it out to that network. I mean, it's amazing to have people hustling and looking out for you.
I'm raising around right now, and it's going to be a messy cap table because it's such a volatile market. So I'm just like collecting $50,000 to like $250,000 checks.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, all right, so we need 65 of these, 20, and we're just sort of, that's our CRM is like, we're just like, we need 65. We believe we can get 65 of these, 30 of these, and that's how we'll put together our cap table. So
I also think as an underrepresented, yes, I hope it works out for you, definitely. And as an underrepresented founder, like it pisses me off when people are like, oh, you only want, 5 or 6 people in this round, or you want less than 10 investors at this stage. You should do one close and get everyone in at once. It's like, right, if I could do that, I would have done that.
Yeah. I'm just going to click my heels together and say, I wish I could. I wish I could go home. Yeah, you got to take what you can get. That's the bottom line.
I took what I could get.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad we did. And they were, for, again, 95% were absolutely extraordinary.
What was your other film? What was it?
I think I assumed they had more experience in early stage investing than they did.
Oh, so they were expecting bigger returns.
I don't think they fully appreciated the risk profile of this investment.
Got it.
And which was just surprising because I thought they had made other angel investments. But maybe they were all new and they hadn't had one go through a challenging moment yet. I don't know.
Yeah, it's something it's really interesting. There's a lot of people that are investors out there, but I don't think there's a lot of smart investors. And I think ultimately you just have a lot of people that follow, but they don't understand risk profiles, return profiles for levels of risk and all the different things. We had this whole discussion the other day at your house over dinner, just about like the different stages of pre-seed and who you're talking to and what you should be giving and what their reward should be and how you should talk to them.
And diversification.
Yeah.
Right. Most are not going to be how you make your money.
Yeah.
But you have to diversify.
Yeah, exactly. So then, so that was March to September with Guidely, and then you've been doing some angel investing, and then you recently started up with a new company, Raiz Capital.
I did. So yeah, Greg Raiz was an investor, one of the 50 in my
his actual name.
Greg Raiz,
great name,
such a great name.
Yeah,
and he had been making angel investments. He also post-exit founder. You'll probably have on this podcast.
I hope so.
He started Raiz Labs, which was a agency that actually really capitalized on the launch of the App Store, the Apple iPhone App Store, and built a lot of the apps we all now use every single day. And built that to, I think, about 100 employees, coast-to-coast offices, and ended up selling that. He had bootstrapped the company, so he did quite well. I sold that in 2017. And
good time to sell too in that space, yeah.
And started angel investing. So he had made 50, 60 angel investments, including in Wishroute, and was just struck with how subjective it is, right? You're betting on the founder. That's the only thing will stay consistent.
Jockey, it's always the jockey.
Right. Everything else is going to change as the founder learns and evolves. And he was just struck like there's got to be a better way. And he had the opportunity to join Techstars in Boston. So he became the MD of Techstars Boston, ran 2 cohorts. And part of why he was attracted to that was they've made thousands of investments. And so there must be some data, some formula he can learn from. And he was still eager for more. It wasn't what he was looking for in terms of that raw data. Mm-hmm. And so he decided to do a year of research. He met with 80 post-exit founders that have had significant exits, $100 million, billion-dollar exits.
We need that list for the show, please.
And looked for attributes. I'm sure we can help you out. And looked for attributes that were similar across them. And then created a 60-question, what we're calling founder index, kind of like a survey. Quick yes-no questions, not like huge mental load. And had those founders fill it out. And now we have new founders fill it out. And the intention is to start collecting more data around this.
Do you share the index with folks? Is it like a publishable report?
The survey, the index is right now, it's internal,
Got it.
but we will be sharing more thought leadership around it and help others learn. Like we really, our goal is to create the change we want to see in the world. We think entrepreneurship's the way to do that. And the more people that can be successful entrepreneurs, the better off we all will be. So we'll definitely be sharing more.
Where can folks listening to the show go to sign up for a newsletter or anything that might be able to get them opt in? I mean, I know I can't wait to hear more about that, and I'm sure the audience will as well.
Yeah, follow us on LinkedIn, Raiz Capital. That's probably the best spot. You can link to our website, and we'll be sharing more there.
Sounds good. We'll include that in the show notes, folks.
Sweet. And then the intention after creating this founder index is to use that to make investment decisions. So we still have a lot more data to collect, but Greg brought me in to start our first cohort. So we made 7 investments in founders that had filled out the index and used it as just a signal, a data point to create a little bit more signal in all the noise, but in addition to regular diligence methods. And we took our founders through a 3-month program we call Accelerate. Because another observation we had about early stage startup acceleration is most accelerators are really designed to attract founders right out of college. But the data shows that founders most likely to be successful are ones that have work experience, that have a professional network.
No, really?
Crazy.
I mean, those who have done something have done something?
Wow.
Wow.
That one of the things that I've constantly told the state of Connecticut about, they have this like big mandate to get college kids to stay after college. And I said the biggest thing that these kids want to do is leave. They want to go to the big cities. They have dreams of New York and LA and San Francisco and Miami and all these places. I said what you should be
opportunity.
I said what you should be doing is focusing on getting them back once they've exhausted themselves with that big city living and those big city expenses. That's when you should go out and reach and see if you can bring them back when they're 25, 26, 27 or later, when they have much more experience.
We should just do a bunch of investments in New York City, and we're going to specifically target people who have gotten pregnancy tests that are positive when they realize that they're going to become parents. And they're like, hey, I'm going to move to Connecticut. That's actually a pretty good media strategy.
You could use that as a data point.
Yeah.
I'm curious, can I take the survey?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll send it to you both. You're both founders.
And then you could tell me after, like,
yeah, your chance of success.
yes, I want to know. It's like 23andMe when you take it and you're like, and then you find out you have like the genetics for Alzheimer's. Like, what do you do at that point? Like, if I found out that I have genetically predisposed to suck at entrepreneurship, should I just hang it up? I don't know.
So our goal is to be less subjective, and part of why only 2% of capital goes to women. Minority founders are significantly underfunded for the proportion of the population is because it's subjective, and people writing checks look at what's familiar and are caught in that. And so by using something more objective, we're excited to level the playing field. Half our founders were women, not by like a formula we had to have half, but because we have diverse deal flow, we use this index to help us make these decisions. And we're creating a remote first accelerator. So we have 2 weeks in person. The first cohort this past fall, we did 1 week in person. Next one's going to have 2 to create a little bit more interconnectedness. The in-person does matter, but half our founders were also working parents. Yeah. And they were able to give their venture, the same attention and momentum that the non-parent founders were. So we're really excited about the format. We're doing some innovative things, like, for instance, we threw out demo day. Demo day is very common for most accelerators, but what we realized is they're very misaligned incentives and goals. Investors like to invest in lines, not a dot in time, and founders are looking in that dot in time demo day for funding. And so they're expecting and spending all this time on this pitch that's really kind of for no one to get funding, and investors are just starting the conversation there. So instead, we brought our founders to Boston, New York, and San Francisco before they're raising, halfway through program, and just in a genuine environment, introduce them to over 100 investors in that 1 week. So we're really excited for that to pay off for them as they go to raise this quarter.
Very cool.
Well, this is very exciting. I don't have any other questions. I mean, you are it's amazing what you've accomplished and what you've learned. And the thing that strikes me is your self-awareness throughout this. It's a lot of inner work. Where did you learn that from?
My mom. Yeah, she's an incredible woman. She's very intuitive. She also has worked as a counselor, helping people with their mental health. So her background was she went to Option Institute and learned a lot like about motivational interviewing and how to handle fear.
Motivational interviewing. I don't think I've heard those words in the same sentence before. I like that.
Yeah, it's actually a lot of what we based the Wishroute judgment-free coaching methodology on. It's about asking questions to help someone get to where they need to get to internally. But yeah, my mom's been my biggest influence in my life.
Is she still in Mass?
Yeah, she is. She splits her time between Marblehead and Martha's Vineyard, actually. She's on a board of Misty Meadows, which is an equine therapy center out there and does amazing work also around mental health.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Since you're doing a lot of teaching now, helping young entrepreneurs, I have to imagine you've put together the Jess curriculum, if you will, and hopefully one day you'll release that. But in the meantime, what are some of your favorite resources, whether you're a book person or a podcast person or whatever it is? Just, I'm always looking for the alpha, the productivity tips that I can share with the folks that I mentor or advise. And certainly there's lots of you listening right now. So what would that look like? Maybe some of the best leadership books or best resources that you can call out, maybe the top one or two?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm starting to create it on my TikTok. So I'll say follow me. And then
What's your TikTok handle?
Jessica L. Lynch.
Okay.
On TikTok.
Check those show notes. Jump
I
on
just
there.
did a series on a video for each slide and a pitch deck of what I wished I had known as a founder, because I'm having such raw, recent ahas, having just been a founder and now being an investor, of what I wished I had understood about the investor perspective. But Lenny's newsletter is my favorite.
So good.
It's so freaking good.
Did you watch his Chesney episode?
Which episode?
The Brian Chesney episode with Airbnb?
No. Oh, wait. Yes, I did, about filtering. Yeah, so good. Yes, I did. Yes. So yeah, love Lenny's newsletter. I subscribe to the premium. There's all these awesome guides on benchmarking for around growth and just, tactics for growth and flywheels. Yeah, love Lenny's. And then Lean Startup. I just think it comes down to being customer centric and doing customer discovery, not going a week without talking to multiple customers. That's a big mistake I see founders make, is they're just scared to talk to people. Like, you gotta get out there.
That's great.
And now I'm excited to make Connecticut my home.
So let's touch on that for half a second. So you're back in Connecticut by way of your husband's family business,
Yes.
car business, right? What do you think of Connecticut so far?
I've received a very warm welcome. It's been incredible. I set out like 2 months ago, decided I want to integrate myself as quickly as possible into the startup community here. I want to invest in Connecticut-based companies. I want this to be an amazing place to start and grow a company. I want to be supportive of that with, time, energy, and money. And so I just started networking, met both of you. Everyone's been connecting me around, and I've met some extraordinary founders. I'm about to make an investment in my first Connecticut-based company.
Wow, congrats.
Thank you.
Can you say who?
We'll do when the ink is signed.
Fair.
I can put it in the show notes and call her out. It's 2 women co-founders, which is even cooler.
Nice.
And just, excited to be part of the ecosystem.
Surprisingly has an interesting infrastructure. It needs a lot of work still. I'm glad to have you a part of the process now. Pete and I have been a part of it for a really long time, and I think we have a really nice base, and it can only go up from here.
Yeah, I really want to bring things I've seen be successful in Boston to this ecosystem, and I think the 3 of us will be working together on that.
So you told us we can find you on TikTok, LinkedIn, Jessica Lynch.
Yep,
Anywhere
Jessica
else?
L. Lynch on LinkedIn and TikTok. Those are the 2 platforms I'm most active on.
Awesome.
Well, thanks for coming on Forward Obsessed, and
So much fun.
stay forward, everybody.
Wow. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Forward Obsessed. Please share this episode, subscribe, and leave a review on your podcast app. If you have feedback or suggestions for our next guest, visit us at forwardobsessed.com. If you want to dive deeper into every interview, subscribe to our Substack at forwardobsessed.substack.com. Also, find us on Instagram or TikTok at forwardobsessed to see all the best moments from every episode. This episode was produced by Robert Roach from District Studios in New Haven, Connecticut. If you would like to learn more about the team that makes this show possible, visit digitalsurgeons.com.